Should we stop pay rises to save the economy? 020 7862 2222. Give us a call. UK wages have risen at a record rate, fueling fears that inflation will stay high for longer. Regular pay grew 7.3% from March to May compared to the same period last year, despite calls from the Bank of England to constrain wages in an attempt to control inflation. Do workers need to accept that to get inflation down, wages need to stop being raised? This is right up your street, Grace, I know.
Yes, it is. Look, we had, in the kind of 13 years since the financial crisis, we've had a just breathtaking stagnation in wages. And I think most people watching this show will realise that because we've seen it in the cost of living crisis. But, we had stagnation after the financial crisis. We've had record declines, actually, if you look at the cost of living crisis in people's real wages. So this is really, we're just starting to see a small recovery. And if I can just briefly explain the kind of economics behind this in terms of why the Bank of England's being pressured to basically raise interest rates to try and to curb this. The idea is that we have something called a wage price spiral. So prices go up, workers demand wages in line with inflation, and that then keeps the thing going. That's kind of what we saw in the 1970s. That's emphatically not what is happening now. Wages haven't been rising. And actually, because workers don't really have very much bargaining power, it's very difficult for them to kind of come together in unions. We've had lots of attacks on unions that make that very difficult. They've seen real declines in their wages. So this is, from a very, very low point, we're starting to see wages just creep up again. And then people are saying, right, we need that to stop. No, we don't. We need wages to carry on increasing.
Carole.
I'm not an economist. Grace knows more about it than I do, but I entirely disagree. I know it's not what people want to hear. But the fact is, if wages go up in a stagnant economy, prices will rise to match. Basic economics say that if wages keep going up, inflation is not going to come down. And we know that this week the ONS has produced figures that say we have the fastest growing wages, the second fastest growing year in terms of wages since records began. The wages have gone up by something like 7.3%. Now, I know it's really rich of Andrew Bailey, the boss of the Bank of England, to say we've got to curb these rises. This guy's on 570 grand a year, which hurts people who are not. I get that. But the fact of the matter is that the government budgeted this year for 3.5% pay rises. There's a story in the papers today saying they've told ministers who are pushing for civil service increases, they've been told that they have to find $3 billion in tax cuts to fund those. We can't do that. And, people out there who are desperate, we know there are tens of thousands of people now that because of rising bank interest rates, their mortgages, they've come out of their deals, their mortgages are going up. My mortgage, what is the word for gone up 5 times? It's not quadrupled. What's
quintupled?
It's done that. It's done that in the last 3 months, and it's terrifyingly bad. So
it's gone up from 100 to 500, basically.
Yes. In fact, it was 500. It's gone up to 5 times that.
Wow.
Yes. So, because
you come off a fixed...
Because I've come off the fixed rate. And
This is the problem that most average people are facing, and this is how interest rates are supposed to affect the economy. The idea is basically that you engineer a slowdown. You engineer basically a kind of recession in extreme cases because you're making borrowing more expensive, which means it's harder for businesses to borrow, so they can't employ people. It's harder for households to borrow. Their mortgages are more expensive, so they can't go out and spend money. You're basically inflicting suffering on people in order to bring down inflation. And the reason we're worried about inflation is because it's inflicting suffering on people.
It
doesn't make any sense.
But it works, doesn't it? It works.
It works sometimes when the problem is wages rising, and that's driving inflation. What we know now from the statistics from some modelling is actually that corporate profits are a much bigger source of rising inflation than wages, because big companies have used this as an excuse to raise prices far above what is being driven by cost.
Pause for a sec. Lee in London is our first caller today. Hi, Lee.
Hello.
Do you think we should stop wage rises to curb inflation? That's our question.
I don't think so. I'm not in favour of strikes. That's for sure. I've had an operation cancelled twice in the last few weeks. I've been waiting for over 2 years. And it's been cancelled because junior doctors are striking for a 35% pay increase, which is utterly ridiculous.
What's the operation for?
It's on my stomach. I've got terrible acid reflux.
Okay. Gosh, so you've dealt with that for 2 years, waiting, and now it's been cancelled again?
Again, yes.
But hang on.
I'm due to have it next week.
So your concern really then is that the people striking for pay rises is creating a different kind of mayhem?
It is, especially in things like the National Health Service, which most of us, 90% of us, are dependents on. Paid in all my life. I'm 73 years of age.
Yeah.
I've paid in. I need something done now. And I'm just hoping that it's not cancelled for a third time next week.
Well, good luck with it, Lee. Thank you very much for calling. Chris in Manchester, hi.
Morning, folks.
Stop wage rises, Chris.
Well, as an employer, we gave a 7.5% pay rise, so you're almost there, Carol, with your statistic. But the problem is this. I mean, I'm on the payroll and I haven't taken a salary for 2 years because we're in hospitality and it's been murder. Now, the other aspect to this is once you give a pay rise, I mean, I do tire with listening to a lot of people say, in real terms, we've not had a pay rise because of inflation. That doesn't mean to say they haven't had a pay rise. They just haven't had a pay rise to keep up with inflation. But the problem is, if you keep doing it, inflation will just carry on rising. And I've made this point on your show before, Jeremy. Once you give a pay rise, you can't take it off. You can't then say next year, right, we gave you 7.5%, so we're now going to give you. Inflation's come down, so we're now going to take 3.5% off.
Well, I guess.
Again, inflation it's the rate of change. So unless we had deflation, prices falling, which is very rare, then you wouldn't expect that to happen.
Well, we had that 12 years ago, didn't we?
But
The financial crisis.
Yeah.
Inflation should be down by now, but it's not because of the growth in wages.
Actually, that isn't the thing that's driving it. As I've said, it's a big problem is corporate profits.
Okay, fine.
There's an economist, Isabella Weber, who has done some research on this that has shown emphatically that a huge portion of what is driving this
But he's on the left,
big
right?
profits.
I mean,
No. This is just it's classic, standard economistic research that's been taken on by lots of big international organisations.
Why doesn't the government accept it?
So the Bank of England is wrong, the government is wrong, but your man's right.
No, I mean, the Bank of England is aware of this research as well, but there's not a lot the Bank of England can do about corporate profits.
The Bank of England said quite clearly.
They can't do anything about corporate
the Bank
profits
of England
because they're responsible for monetary policy.
It is the wage rises.
Right, okay.
The Bank of England said
just talk
clearly
over
it's
each
the
other.
wage rises that are stopping
But it's not.
inflation
That's
coming
factually
down.
incorrect.
So they're wrong, but your guy is right.
No, what you just said is that the Bank of England is saying this. The Bank of England is left with one policy tool, basically, to fight inflation, which is to control interest rates. The government has many other tools that it can use to curb inflation, such as, for example, the windfall tax.
Andrew Bailey has called for a curb in wage rises.
Because the Bank of England is basically being told you have a remit to fight inflation. This is the only thing you're allowed to use. The Bank of England has also said in the past, government, you are actually working against us in some ways when you don't align monetary policy.
Pause if you can. Sorry to interrupt both of you. Chris in Manchester, thank you. William in Dorset, hi.
Oh, hi, Jeremy. How are you?
It's good. It's so good to have callers on. So what would you like to say, William?
Well, the reason we have inflation and they're putting wages up is because the Bank of England keep putting interest rates up. We have cost-push inflation, although it's now moving away from that because the Bank of England continue to put interest rates up.
So, all right.
I don't know. There's a hidden agenda here, and I don't understand it. I studied economics for 40 years. I don't understand why they're putting interest rates up, unless it's just purely to keep the value of the pound up.
Well, it might be, Carol. It might be old school thinking. This it's the idea back in the Thatcher days is that you had the one club golfer, they called him Nigel Lawson. He only had interest rates. And it's William might be right.
I don't think the Bank of England is innocent in all of this. I don't think it's accepted responsibility for its role. It poured loads of money into the economy with quantitative easing. That has a terrible effect on inflation, and we know it does.
The reason that it did that was because government policy was working in the opposite direction again.
Well,
you had.
I'm trying to say that the Bank of England is not innocent in all of this.
But to take your mortgage as an example, you've said it's gone from 500 to 2,500.
Yeah.
So when you go into work, let's say your newspaper, you say, look, I can't pay my mortgage anymore. I want a pay rise, right?
I could say that.
Yeah.
And nothing would happen.
Yes, but that's how the interest rates rising creates inflation. That's what I'm saying.
Not everyone can expect an inflation-busting pay rise, because where do they think the cash is going to come from? It's just not there.
Well, it is there. It's there in dividends. It's there in corporate profits.
It is not there.
Some of the biggest companies have seen chart-topping profits whether those are the big fossil fuel companies, some of the big banks, and that is getting distributed to shareholders, some of the wealthiest people in the economy. And this is, I think, the point, right? You know, when you were saying the Bank of England pumped money into the economy after the financial crisis, why did they do that? Because they had a mandate to stimulate the economy. Why did they have to use so many extreme measures to stimulate the economy? Because the government was there saying, we're going to slash spending, we're going to cut all this demand out of the economy. So it's on them to do it. Now it's the other way round. And actually, we could have the government saying, we're going to take some responsibility for this problem
increase spending.
through the tax system.
All right, okay.
Through the tax system.
Oh, I see,
make
tax
it
more.
fair. That
Okay.
is another way of dealing with inflation. It's not just about interest rates.
Okay, and thank you, William. Anma in London, hi.
Oh, hello.
This is interesting, all this economics, isn't it?
Definitely is. Now, my answer to whether pay rises should cease in order to save the economy, my answer to that is no. Not because I don't want the economy to improve, because I do, but to my own understanding, pay rises and bonuses are two different things. So let's say, for instance, pay rises stop, companies and organisations will still make a profit, which will mean even more bonuses and money for shareholders, unless, of course, the government and organisations stop paying all these huge bonuses as well.
So they cut the pay of the cleaner, but they don't cut the pay of the CFO. That's the point.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not fair.
No. Okay. Point taken. Thank you so much.